Welcome into PEC Match Point, your premier destination for news around the PEC. We've got a packed show, so make sure you stick around. We only have 3 more weeks left until the playoffs. Can you believe that? We got everything you need from the last week of action. We've got highlights, we've got standings, up to date, everything you need to know about the Power Esports Conference, the premier FBS Esports Conference. It's, of course, brought to you by the Idaho Air National Guard. And let's take a look what we've got on the show today. Again, crazy show here. Again, we're almost done with the season. That's insane to think about. We've got highlights from week 6. Utah Overwatch absolutely on fire, by the way, right now. We'll talk about what they did in their matchup against Ohio State. We'll go inside the PEC. We've got a 1 versus 2 matchup in Valorant coming up as we look ahead to week 7, and we'll keep you updated on everybody's standings with the playoffs just a few weeks away. But we start things off, as always, with Rocket League. And Boise State and Syracuse, they once again delivered an epic Rocket League series. The teams went 5 games just like they did in the fall, but this time it was Boise State who had to rally back. The Broncos found themselves down in an 0-2 hole, but they quickly picked up a pair of wins, 2-1 and then 3-1, to force the Orange into a do-or-die Game 5 with a chance at a reverse sweep. After Boise had broken a 1-1 tie with just over 3 minutes left in Game 5, the Broncos looked to find the dagger in the final minute.
For the double tap, sends it down, baby, gets the save, but there is Preston going for another shot. Durtho follows through, not going to find it.
Not going to find it, but a great offensive push out of the Broncos is going to buy time here, and a shot is just sent wide. Preston sending this one long, wasting so much time. Now less than a minute into the hands of Durtho. Looks to wait around. Tiz trying to get a demo onto it, just barely misses. Flip around one, Nano into an awkward position. Woozy with a shot, and in!
2-goal game!
Great job by Boise State on that reverse sweep. Well, Ohio State and Utah, they got in on the 5-game action as well. They played their own 3-2 series. The squad split the first 4 games back and forth, but the Buckeyes, they left no doubt in the finale. They shut down Utah 4-0 in Game 5 to take the series. Dan Ward led the way with 3 goals in the final game. The Buckeyes, their offense was relentless all night. 64 shots on goal. Every player took at least 20 in the series. Baylor, they did what they always do against Minnesota, win and win quickly. The Bears picked up another sweep in their undefeated season. 3-0 over Minnesota. They won 3-0, 4-1, 4-2. A balanced attack for Baylor saw all 3 players score at least 3 goals, with Hoxer and Andy putting 4 in the back of the net themselves. And with this win, Baylor has secured the #1 seed for PEC Rocket League heading into Vegas. They are in a class of their own this season. And wrapping things up was Michigan State. They continued their strong split. They took down Kansas 3-0 on the back of a very strong defensive performance. A pair of shutouts, 4-0 and 3-0. Only allowed 1 Jayhawk goal the entire series. Did this Michigan State defense. Absolutely phenomenal job by the Spartans. And of course, one more bit of housekeeping. Syracuse and Utah, we mentioned it. They pushed their game back. Those teams both had doubleheaders this week. And this was another series that did not disappoint. These teams played all 5 games. Syracuse just barely pulling out the win against Utah. But Utah, again, this team continues to show that they're one of the better teams in the PEC. We take a look at how the week went down in PEC. Again, Kansas falling to Michigan State, a sweep there. Boise State, a sick reverse sweep against Syracuse. That's massive for them. Ohio State picking up a 3-2 win over Utah. The Utes just coming so close in both their games this week. And then Baylor doing what they do with the 3-0 win over Minnesota. Take a look at the standings. As we mentioned, Baylor at 14-0. They have officially locked in that #1 spot heading into Vegas. Boise State at 12-3. One more win, they lock in that 2 seed. And then things get really spicy. Syracuse and Michigan State tied for 3rd. Ohio State and Kansas tied for 5th. Nebraska, Minnesota, right between those 2 teams for 7th place. I think the bottom of the standings in Rocket League going to be a ton of fun to watch. We move on to Overwatch. We were hyping this up all week last week. Pair of top 4 showdowns with the new heroes on board, and Utah, they officially announced their arrival in the PEC. They had a heavyweight showdown with #1 Ohio State, and after the Buckeyes took Game 1, the Utes took over. Utah quickly put Ohio State on the back foot with a pair of wins. They pushed the series to 2-1, and on Flashpoint, we go to point 5, where Utah was looking to shut down any hopes of Ohio State having a comeback.
Overtime, and Ohio State has to flush on point here, but they're in the way of Utah. PDK going to pop the ult, going to get red. There's the Kitsune Rush and the Orisa Ultimate. It is nigh unwinnable for Ohio State, and there goes the team wipe and the game and the match.
Utah with a very strong hold right on that final flashpoint. Multiple
Syracuse and Boise State, their top 4 showdown, that also lived up to the hype. The Orange, of course, you remember, beat the Broncos in the fall. They took a 1-0 lead, but much like Utah, Boise State quickly took control of the series from there with back-to-back wins of their own. But unlike Ohio State and Utah, Boise State on Flashpoint left little room for doubt. They quickly jumped up 2-0 and looked to close out the series with a 3-1 victory of their own.
But the captured is there, and we're in overtime. Boise State, if they can find this, it's the end, and Syracuse knows that, trying to jump in, looking for that opportunity. Lunar actually swapping to Wrecking Ball himself to look for that speedy spot, but he's gonna be taken down. That is, whoa, Mac out, and that is an overtime done. The Broncos take the flashpoint, and that is their match point.
Vengeance.
Minnesota, they made quick work of the Bears. A 3-0 win, including a pair of shutouts, but it kind of sandwiched a really fun game, too, that went into overtime. The Gophers took that one 6-4. Very strong performance by BPO and what's his name. They both dropped over 60 kills in the win for Minnesota. We take a look at the results because the top of Overwatch is getting really, really spicy. Boise State and Utah both picking up those 3-1 wins, winning 3 maps in a row. Minnesota, a 3-0 win of their own. Take a look at the standings, just how close things are at the top of Overwatch. We've got Boise State at 10-3, Utah at 10-3, Ohio State at 9-2, and then there's sort of a drop-off. Syracuse and Kansas, they're battling. Minnesota potentially can sneak up if things go their way, and then Baylor and Nebraska round things out. And let's take a look at just how close the top of the standings are here between Boise State, Utah, and Ohio State. We've got the Broncos in lead right now. We have to go to the 6th tiebreaker, by the way, to separate these teams. It's match win percentage, then match wins, and then match losses. We've got that all on the screen for you here. You see Boise State just edging out Utah, 72%, that 33-13 match record. And the Broncos, they've only got 1 game left. It's against Ohio State. We'll tell you more about that one coming up later in the show. Utah, they're on a bye this week, but they only have 1 game left of their own. They're taking on Nebraska. It's going to be tough for Utah to run down Boise State unless the Broncos lose. But watch out for Ohio State. They're in 3rd right now, but as you can tell, they've got 2 less games played. They've still got a full schedule the rest of the year, but they have the overall advantage, 79% on that map win record. So they maybe beat Boise State, beat Baylor, and beat Kansas. They can shoot right up to number 1, but it's going to be a lot of fun. These 2 teams down to the wire. Again, we're going to 6, maybe 7, maybe even 8 or 9th tiebreakers to determine who's going to be the number 1 seed. PEC Overwatch has been a ton of fun this season. Speaking of fun, though, let's move on to Valorant because Boise State and Syracuse, their fun didn't just stop at Overwatch. These 2 teams, we've been talking all year about how good the Syracuse team is. They've pushed some of the best teams in the PEC to the brink, and they did that here against Boise State, a 13-4 win to kick things off. But the Broncos quickly answered back, and they proved why they've been a top Valorant for so long. Boise State evened up that series 13-2 in Game 2. And after back-to-back blowouts, Game 3, though, it didn't disappoint us as the Broncos, it turned into a slugfest. They held a slim 12-10 lead and looked to close things out for their league-leading 14th victory.
Need to go anywhere. He doesn't need to leave. He doesn't have gate crash, and he doesn't care. If they swing him, he'll be ready. He even has skies to trade. Smoke comes through, and they have no choice but to walk out. 17 seconds faster. Set up. Is he ready? Of course he is. Skies gets the second, and it's all on to 1. It's Maboogie, the last player towards heaven. The first kill, but time is not there, and the Broncos win a nail-biter.
Utah, their Valorant team, they've been lurking. We've been keeping an eye on them. They've been in the top half of the standings, and they got a major chance at a victory against number 2 Ohio State. And the Utes, they jumped on the Buckeyes early. A swift 13-5 victory in Game 1, put themselves on match point. They limited the normally potent Buckeyes lineup. We've taken a look at their stats. Full negative KDs across the board. This is how good Utah has been. And in Game 2, things got a little tighter. The Utes held on to a narrow 12-10 lead with Ohio State on the verge of forcing overtime. Utah shut the door.
Drift stalled out by Ashton's wall.
He's going to spot him.
Eventually falling back. We also have the convergent pass coming out. Waldy blinded. IsoPetro, though, connects on the Tempest, but on stage is able to get 2. D1 finding bot. Now a 2v4 for IsoPetro and Patience. Ashton reviving Tempest as well. Patience finds D1, but Ashton and on stage getting the final kills needed for Utah to take Corrode.
Defending Valorant champs Michigan State, they got in the action as well. They had a nice 2-0 sweep over Kansas. They had a pair of 13-5 victories. It's their 10th win of the year in the PEC. They're chasing those teams above them. 4 Spartans post at least 33 kills in the win. All 5 of them had positive KD. Slouch led the way with a 2-0. Meanwhile, Bullseye, he had a team leading 26 kills for the Jayhawks, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to take down the defending champs. Baylor and Minnesota, they had a very back-and-forth 3-game series. The Bears end up picking up their 3rd win of the year. The Gophers, they start things off with an epic 15-13 win on game 1, but from there, Baylor found the rhythm, winning 13-7, and then ultimately joining the 13-10 party as they won game 3 by that score as well. Shout out to Leno, by the way. 73 kills for the Bears. That is a PEC high this week. We've been telling you, Baylor's got a lot of individually talented players, and it came out to show here today as the Bears picked up the win. We take a look at how Valorant played out again. Boise State barely edging out Syracuse. The shocker maybe, though, Utah beating Ohio State in a sweep. Michigan State picking up the win, and then Baylor doing that as well. As we take a look, these standings are incredibly close as well in Valorant. Boise State at 14-1. They've got one more game left against Ohio State. That's going to be an absolute lot of fun. Michigan State, they're trying to hold off a surging Utah team that people really, I don't think, have given enough credit to. And then Kansas, Syracuse, Minnesota, anything in Baylor as well. Those teams could go from 5th to 9th in a heartbeat. So Valorant's going to be a lot of fun as well as these teams kind of jockey for position as the playoffs are really close upon us. And moving on to Smash, Boise State, they've been one of the hottest teams in PEC Smash, and they gave Syracuse, who's been a front runner all year, all they could handle. The Broncos took the Orange to all 3 games. Boise State won the first match at 11-10. Supersonic does just enough in match 4 to secure the win. The Orange, they answered back a 14-6 performance to force game 3, and game 3 went the distance. Match 4, Syracuse entered claiming just an 8-7 lead, but Syrup does what he always does. He shut the door on Boise State. A perfect 4-0 win gave the series over to the Orange. Minnesota picked up their 9th win of the year. They took down Baylor 2-0. But both games came down to the final match. The Gophers got a 4-2 win from Sriracha in game 1 to close out the game 13-8. And then in game 2, Doug Todd shut the door on any chance of Baylor coming back. He picked up a 4-1 win over Howard the Ghastly to secure that series 14-8 and pick up the sweep. And Michigan State, they do what they always do. They continued their perfect season. Though the Jayhawks did make it interesting. The Spartans entered their final match of game 1 only 9-8 before Dice took down Postmortal to make it a win. And in game 2, the Spartans ended things quickly. 3 straight match wins before taking the series 14-8. And they keep their perfect season and perfect match record intact. But it's getting a little scary. So again, we take a look back at what went down in week 6. Boise State, I think this Overwatch team's going to make, or not Overwatch, Smash team, excuse me, going to make a lot of noise here. Even though they couldn't get the job done against Syracuse, they've been one of the hotter teams in recent weeks. Michigan State, Minnesota, we know all about them. I think that's going to be an absolute massive showdown when those 2 teams play each other. We take a look at the standings here. Again, it's starting to become sort of a 3-team race. Michigan State at 12-0. They just need one more win to secure that number 1 seed. Nebraska's hanging around. Minnesota, Syracuse lost a little bit of ground, but they're still top 4 team. But watch out for Boise State at 4-9. They have been making moves. Won 2 of their last 3. Nearly had a 3-game winning streak if they'd taken down Syracuse. I think this is going to be a squad to watch as we go forward. That is going to do it as we look back on the league. Now, let's look ahead to what's coming up in the PEC. We've got a 1 versus 2 showdown. We're going to tell you everything that you need to know for when it comes to teams locking in those very, very precious number 1 seeds. We'll take a quick break here on PEC Match Point, but we'll be back as we look ahead to the next week.
Scott Matlock, underrated recruit, has built himself into one of the best defensive players in the Mountain West.
What would you do if you couldn't fail? Would you see every setback as a catalyst to keep going? This is the innovator's mindset, because innovation demands daring. Is finding thousands of ways that don't work, and the one that changes everything. It's when your unrelenting spirit sees the world's needs and says, I will create something better. So, what will you do? Will you let your genius run wild? Give yourself the space to be great. Set your sights on something even bigger, because we know changing the world doesn't happen by chance. It comes out of the blue.
Since you guys have been in here, some things have changed. We've updated this place to be in its final form. New cabinets, new counters, all sorts of new stuff in here. This has turned into a place that wouldn't look out of place at an SEC or Big Ten football facility, and Dairy West has allowed us to have it here. We've taken a holistic approach to our player nutrition, and we're really thankful that Dairy West has made sure that our fueling station is the best in college esports and really at industry standard for any college athletic department.
How's it look so far? Comfortable?
I got in. Who you share it with?
This is a great use of your own
Who you share it with?
My friends know me as Derek, but I'm also Master Sergeant Raxter. This is my life in the Air National Guard.
Now earn up to 4 times the rewards with the ICCU Premier Rewards Visa credit card. It's the credit card from the credit union you love.
Ladies and gentlemen, attention please. About to start the show. Better take your seats. It's time to let the curtain out. You're gonna shake the room. You're gonna
Now earn up to 4 times the rewards with the ICCU Premier Rewards Visa credit card. It's the credit card from the credit union you love.
How's it look so far?
Into PEC Match Point. If you want more from the Power Esports Conference, make sure you head over to the official PEC website for everything you need. We've got power rankings, player profiles, predictions, analysis on the biggest matchups of the season. Make sure you stay informed, stay connected, and stay ahead with all things PEC. Head over to pec.leagueos.gg. Of course, PEC Match Point brought to you by the Idaho Air National Guard. It's time to look ahead to what's coming up for Week 7 of the PEC. We start with Rocket League, and as we mentioned earlier in the show, the top team, Baylor, they've already locked in their top spot at 14-0. The only thing left, they've got a date with perfection if they can finish off these last 2 teams, and we'll see what they can do. They've got a Syracuse team who they entered the week tied with Michigan State for 3rd place. If the Orange want to keep a chance at the 3rd seed alive, they have to do what nobody's been able to do all year, and that's take down this very powerful Baylor Bears Rocket League squad. Boise State, they have a chance to join Baylor if the Broncos can take down Ohio State, which one more win for Boise State will clinch 2nd place in the PEC. Otherwise, a loss could mean that spot is up in the air. The Broncos, by the way, they have a bye the last 2 weeks of the year. They're off next week, and then their final week got moved up, if you remember, all those weeks ago. It's crazy how fast time flies against Nebraska. So this is their final regular season game for Ohio State. The Buckeyes, they're just slimly ahead of Kansas for that 5th seed, and they need to keep any edge they can heading into the final week, so they would love a win here as well. Michigan State, they entered the week in 4th place, but one slip up from Syracuse could easily put them on the inside track for the 3rd seed. They take on a Kansas squad, as we mentioned. They're battling with Boise State. There's battles throughout. It's not just the top spots that are up for grabs, but 5th place, 3rd place, everything's on the line this week, and if Kansas can get the job done, this would be a massive upset. Both them and Ohio State looking to maybe take down a top team. And then Nebraska, Minnesota, they square up. They're both teams who are looking to end that regular season on the right note. The Gophers, their recent hot streak has hit an abrupt halt. They've lost their last 2. Of course, that was to Baylor and Boise State. Not a lot of teams can beat those. Well, the Cornhuskers, they've had an up and down year so far, but both teams, they've showed they compete with the top squads, and you get any momentum for either one of these squads going to the playoffs, that's going to be absolutely massive. Moving on to Overwatch, we took a look at how close the standings are, and this is the big one. Boise State and Ohio State, they kick off Week 7 of the PEC Overwatch with a heavyweight showdown. The Broncos, they're coming off a win last week against Syracuse. They're trying to put the finishing touches on a strong season, and if they pick up the win, they have a strong chance of maybe being that number 1 seed. For the Buckeyes, they need a rebound. They had a tough loss last week to Utah. Boise State won this matchup in the fall as well, but if Ohio State can win, they'll control their own destiny for the number 1 spot. So I think this is going to be a ton of fun, must watch for Overwatch, because again, you can go from 1 to 3 in a heartbeat here. here, and you don't want to be the 3rd seed heading into the playoffs. Syracuse, they'll get a chance to rebound. They face off against a Baylor team who's got a ton of potential. The Orange, maybe hoping for a late season collapse from some of the teams above them if they want a shot at the top seed, but they can't afford a letdown either. They've got Kansas only a game behind them as well. Don't forget about this Jayhawk squad. Meanwhile, Baylor, they've had some strong outings lately. Maybe, if they pick up a massive win here, can make some noise heading to the playoffs from in. Everything kind of resets in the playoffs. We saw it last year in the PEC. Some of those bottom teams making crazy runs. Minnesota and Kansas, they wrap up the week in a battle. Could have some massive impacts on the lower half of the standings. If Minnesota gets this win, they have a chance to sneak past Kansas depending on what happens. Meanwhile, the Jayhawks, don't forget, this team was top of the league a few weeks into the fall. They faltered a little bit here, but a win here, a Syracuse loss potentially somewhere down the road, they could all of a sudden find themselves in a top 4 spot. Moving on into Valorant, another big one between Boise State and Ohio State. We talked about this, number 1 versus number 2. As Boise State can get a shot at their lone loss in the PEC as they take on Ohio State. Again, Ohio State beat them in an epic fall series 2-1. Dez with the pop-off clip of the year in overtime to secure the win. Boise State, speaking of wins, if they do that here, they will be guaranteed the top spot heading into the playoffs. Meanwhile, Ohio State, who they've fallen back down to earth. Remember, the Buckeyes were 10-0 at one point. They still can control their own destiny. They win here against Boise State. They finish out the season strong. If both those teams finish 14-2, Buckeyes have a slight advantage right now. Syracuse, their season of what-ifs continued as they took another top squad to 3 games, but this time they couldn't quite finish off Boise State. At 4-9, this team has played well above their record, and they get a chance to right the ship against a very talented Baylor squad that has players. As we saw, Leno, he can put up kills in a hurry. I think he's 5th in the PEC right now in individual kills. And if Baylor, they get hot, they pick up a 2nd straight win, who knows what noise they're going to make going on into the playoffs. Kansas and Minnesota, they square off. The Gophers, they had a tough series. They fell just short against Baylor last week, while the Jayhawks swept against Michigan State. And both these teams looking to just hold on to the standings. The Kansas, it's just a game ahead of Syracuse for that 5th spot, while Minnesota, a slim edge separates them and Baylor for that 7th spot. So this is must-win games for both teams. And then Michigan State and Nebraska, they wrap up week 10, or they wrap up the week of PEC Valorant with a Big Ten showdown, The Spartans, they're sandwiched between Ohio State and Utah and hope to capitalize on maybe a loss from the Buckeyes and shoot up into 2nd place. Remember, they're the defending champs. You do not want to count Michigan State out. They need to make sure they pick up a win against Nebraska that's been tough, and they probably need to do it in a sweep. As we saw, those tiebreakers can come up to you in a hurry. So we'll have to see. Again, Nebraska, they've taken some of the best in the PEC deep into rounds, 13-10s, 13-11s, and they can make some noise here even with just a win. PEC Smash, it's going to wrap things up. We get a full slate of action. It doesn't happen very often with all 8 teams in action. As we start off with Syracuse taking on Baylor. The Orange nearly fell to Boise State last week before a clutch game 3 from Syrup to puncture that victory. Meanwhile, for the Bears, after playing number 3 Minnesota very, very close, they took both games into match 4 just before losing. They've showed signs of fight in the pass, and again, Syracuse maybe looks a little more vulnerable than we would have expected, and Baylor could easily capitalize. Michigan State and Nebraska, they square off. The Spartans need just one more win to officially clinch that number 1 seed, and they cannot afford to look ahead as Nebraska, while they can't quite catch them in the standings, they're right there and maybe get a number 2 spot if they pick up the win. Of course, Michigan State has not lost a match all season long, so they've got double the pressure on them. We'll see if the Cornhuskers can maybe make a statement. Even if you take a game, that sort of opens the door for a world of possibilities. Boise State, as we said, they've looked maybe one of the best teams in Smash in recent weeks, not named Michigan State. A 2-game winning streak, nearly beat Syracuse, took them to all 3 games. They're trying to finish the season on a high note. They can still catch Kansas for that 5th spot, but if they want to do it, they need a win against Ohio State. That's very well rested. The Buckeyes coming off a bye. Minnesota and Kansas, they'll wrap up the week. The Gophers, they got a slight edge on Nebraska for that 2nd seed. With only those 2 losses, as long as they keep winning, they'll jump right past the Cornhuskers. And up next is Kansas. The Jayhawks, they've looked strong at times this year. They've beaten a lot of teams below them. Now they need to prove that they can beat the teams above them, especially because the Jayhawks need a win to keep searching Boise State behind them in the standings. I think this one is sneakily going to be a 3-game series, but I think Minnesota might get it done. But again, you want to make sure you check into that. Let's take a look at our matchups coming in to Week 7 of the PEC. Again, we've got a lot of fun. There's only 3 weeks left. Nebraska and Michigan State. This is a much-watched Smash game to kind of get a sense of how good the Spartans truly are. Minnesota taking on Kansas. In almost every single title, these teams are like neck and neck for 5th or 6th place, so there's a lot of implications there. Syracuse taking on Baylor. Of course, can Baylor Rocket League get the job done, move to 15-0? Syracuse has been tough all season. And then Boise State and Ohio State, Overwatch, Valorant, must-watch games. The Broncos and Buckeyes both have a shot at the number 1 seed in both of those respective titles, depending on how the outcome goes. But Week 7, It's shaping up to be an exciting week in the PEC, so make sure you join us next week. We'll get you caught up on all the action. We'll tell you what the playoffs are looking like. Again, only 3 weeks left in the regular season. Of course, make sure you head over to pec.leagueos.gg. It's everything you need to know for the Power Esports Conference. PEC Match Point, it's been brought to you by the Idaho Air National Guard. Good luck to all the teams, and we'll see everybody next week.